Hello, ladies and gentlemen. You're listening to a brand new episode of The Local Lens, a podcast where we go inside one community's experience with the drug epidemic. This show is coming to you from Stanton, Kentucky, a small town nestled at the foothills of Appalachia. So everyone in our town sees this drug problem a little bit differently from each other, from their personal lives or professional roles. So the goal of this show then is to gather all of those perspectives and tell our town's collective story of addiction. And this episode is just story time. We were joined by Mr. Bill Helton, who at the time of the interview was working at Stanton Family Clinic as a peer support specialist. And my goodness, this guy has a story. He's been through the ringer with addiction. He's been fighting this since he was a teenager. And it ends up tying together his parents, his children, his relationships, all of it. Well, I'll let him tell the story, and I'll break it into chapters a little tiny bit. Well, alright, that's good enough for an intro. Let's go on and get into the episode. Once again, you're listening to The Local Lens, a project from Powell County Cares at the Powell County Health Department. I'm your host, Nate Brooks, and these are our people using our voices, telling our stories, because no one sees it like we do.
Okay, my name is Bill Helton. I was born and raised in Hazard. I'm 49 years old. But I was born and raised to a very much all-American family, very well-respected, well-liked family in Hazard. And the reason I mention that is that this can happen to anyone, no matter how good your upbringing. I was one of those people who, for whatever reason, I always felt less than everyone else. I felt inferior to others. I was shy. I was withdrawn. But when I would drink, I found that it brought me out of my shell. I drank some Jim Beam when I was 15 years old. That was the first mind-altering chemical that I put in my body. That seemed really innocent at the time, but I loved the effect that it had on me. And I wanted to be as far away from any crowd as I could be when I wasn't drinking. But when I was drinking, I wanted to be the center of attention. And for whatever reason, I wanted to feel different, and alcohol made me feel the way I wanted to feel, and so I continued to drink. I drank more, and it became almost a daily thing for me. And I would even drink by myself. I would sneak pints of liquor back into my mom and dad's house and go to my bedroom and act like I was listening to music or doing homework, and I'd be up there drinking, and I'd pass out drunk right in my bed, and They didn't know it for years. Okay, I'm a heavy drinker at this point. I'm 18 years old. But there's a part of me that doesn't want to be that person that's an alcoholic that I've become. And of course, I didn't consider myself one at the time. But I knew deep down I was in denial, I guess you'd say. So I wanted to be successful, make my dad proud of me because he'd been so successful in Hazard. He was a 6 and 11 o'clock news anchor man on the Hazard television station, and it was big shoes to fill, walking in my dad's footsteps like that. I wanted people to be proud of me too, and I wanted to be successful like he was, but I just wasn't putting in the work that he had put in all his life. And anyway, I would put this mask on in public to people and pretend to be somebody I wasn't. I worked a couple of small jobs, but like for a month. But the first real job I had was for the Hazard City Police, believe it or not. And here I am, basically an outlaw and terrorizing the police at times. But I never got charged with anything because they I guess they had mercy on all us young kids. They knew us and watched us grow up, and they'd give us every break in the world. But somehow, against all odds, I get a job for the police department as a radio dispatcher. So I'm in here working and dispatching calls out to these same officers who had to basically they threatened to arrest me many times. Like I said, they would always, in the end, they'd take us home or something. Not just me, but others, all of us kids. And I just turned 20 at the time I got that job, and I worked there for like 2 years as a dispatcher, and then an opening came up for a police officer. So I thought, I'm already within the department. I might have a heads up, getting this job here. I don't even want it from the outside. So I applied and ultimately got that job. So now I'm a city police officer in a town working with officers I used to terrorize, literally. December of '92, I began that job. And I did a good job as a police officer. I was real detailed with all my accident reports and case reports. And so it was an opportunity for me to like really have a good life, turn my life around from, and it's not like I had I'd never done drugs at this point other than the marijuana. And of course alcohol is a drug, but I'd never done prescription medicine or narcotics, scheduled drugs on the street.
So we can consider that chapter 1. And now let's move into chapter 2, the entrepreneurship days.
I had begun training dogs on the side. And I hooked up with a guy who had trained dogs professionally in the past, and we started training dogs. We bought a Rottweiler puppy out of a litter. I bought a male and he bought a female. We started training these dogs. He was showing me these things. I was so intrigued with this dog training, so fascinated with it. And I told him, I said, we could make money doing this. And I got so good at it because I loved it so much. I was so into this. And we started a dog training business, and he was working for a local businessman in Hazard doing maintenance work and had a good full-time job, making plenty of money, this guy did. I said, we ought to quit our jobs and do this full-time. He said, that's a big step to take right there. Now, you know, we both got families. I said, yeah, I know we could do it, though. We could make good money. And I eventually did it and jumped out on my own and started doing it. And I had success doing it, actually, and I started showing him the success. I'd say, look at this, I've made this much. I'd show him like $1,000 and say, I made this off 3 dogs in the last 2 weeks. You know, how much have you cleared in the last 2 weeks? You know, eventually he quit and went with me wide open, and we started training dogs, and we trained hundreds of dogs, literally. But we let that money destroy us. We trained some dogs for some people who, and these were like wealthy people in Perry County who used drugs, and we got introduced to drugs through this. Actually, he had used before, but he didn't cause me to. It was no one caused me to. It was we started using drugs together with clients, with our customers, and it really spiraled out of control quick. It started with cheap pain medication, Lortab. Lorcet, hydrocodone is the ingredient in it. It's just a pain pill that basically gives you energy. Some of the wealthier people that we worked for did cocaine, and I don't remember. I won't tell exactly how it came about, but we ended up using cocaine. Within a few months, I went from someone who'd never put a controlled substance in me to using cocaine. I didn't really become addicted to cocaine though. I became addicted to the pain medicine. I became chronically addicted to the pain medication. I was doing oxycodone, hydrocodone, and still doing some cocaine as well and drinking. So we decided to add fencing to our business to learn how to install chain link fence, because every customer seemed like that we train a dog for, we want a fence. They would ask about a fence, and we recommended them to the local fence companies. And one day I said, so why are we recommending these people to all these other fence companies when we could be doing this ourselves? And he said, well, I don't know, we just have to learn how to do it, I guess. And so I went on a mission to learn how to do it, and actually went and volunteered to work for a fence company in Manchester just for free to learn how to do it. My only motive was to start my own fence business. After a couple months, I did that after I learned the do's and don'ts and the how-tos of it, and started a fence business that was a mega success. Like we had $10,000 saved in cash, you know, like in just a few weeks, just from jobs we were doing. But that was like our downfall. Once again, like that, we were spending more money than we were taking in on drugs, honestly. I don't know, like our fence business or our dog training business, you know, suffered to say the least. This business venture that we went on, leaving our full-time jobs and so would have been a success had we not been using drugs. But we were. So we were squandering everything that we made. 1998, for the first time, I got bad enough that my family really noticed it. And like, for the first time, I admitted to them, because they'd asked me before and I'd lied and said, no, I'm not. I don't know why y'all think that. But the reason they thought it is because they knew how busy I was with this business, and how I was leaving out every morning with a load full of chain link fence and coming back empty. So, but I was having to borrow money off my dad to buy the next load of material. So it became evident something was wrong. So I admitted I was using. I cried like a baby over it. it was a big deal to me that my family had to be put through that. And I agreed to go to treatment. I went to a short-term treatment program in Corbin called the Trillium Center. It's actually only just technically it's called a detox, but they kept me like 23 days there. I came back motivated to do better. I did better for like 3 months, and I relapsed. I went back to the Trillium Center, stayed clean 3 months, relapsed. I did that 5 times altogether. I went literally 3 months between each visit.
Now that concludes Chapter 2. Moving forward, it seems like this is the point where things start getting outside of his control, where it seems like things start getting much messier, the consequences are heavier, and it's just wilder in general.
2001, I had just left treatment for the 5th time, and I'm at an NA meeting, and I'm doing really well. I've been clean 54 days. It's a long time for me at that time. And I was healthy and looked great again, felt great. I go to a meeting, I come out of the meeting, and my mom and dad's neighbors waiting in the parking lot. I didn't know they were waiting for me. I saw them, and I tried to avoid them intentionally because I thought, oh my God, they see me coming out of an NA meeting, they're going to look down on me. Well, little did I know they were there just for me, had been sent to give me some news. Finally I realized they're not going to leave, and I had to get to the vehicle that I'd ridden with a guy. Had to get to, eventually he said, man, I can't sit here all night, we've got to go. So he started through the parking lot, and they said, hey, come here. I walked over there, they said, listen, we got some bad news for you. Said, you need to be strong when we tell you this. Said, one of your boys has been hit by a car in Knott County. He said, we don't know how bad it is, but we're here to pick you up, take you to the hospital. They're on their way there with him now. So when we pulled up, I just see everybody on their hands and knees, wailing and crying, and so I knew it was terrible. And so he eventually gets flown to UK, and he dies the next day because it was determined there was no brain activity. So me and my dad were the last ones to go in with him in the ICU unit and to visit him and say our goodbyes to him. So I just left treatment, and like I said, I've been clean 54 days at this point. I stayed clean for maybe a week after that, and I ended up relapsing again. Now, then I started going to jail. I went to jail like 5 times that year. At first, the judges were merciful to me because of my family and because of the situation where my child had just died. But then eventually that mercy ran out, as it should have. But somehow I ended up not going to jail from 01 to 06. Now I was doing worse than I'd ever done, but like they had just worked. They weren't able to catch me, I guess you'd say. And by 2003, I started going to a pain clinic. I was going to a pain clinic at first in Louisville, then jumped to Dayton, Ohio, then back to Louisville. Then I was going to both at the same time, doctor shopping. Because of the fact they were in different states is the only way I didn't get in trouble for that. And I was going and getting a absolute ridiculous amount of methadone. And methadone became my drug of choice. But I found a pain doctor in Indiana. I found one in Newcastle and one in New Albany. And I was going to both of these at the same time. Now, these two were in the same state. And one of my doctors caught me doing it. Now, he didn't turn me in or anything, but he said that he said, you can't see both doctors. You can't see 2 doctors for the same thing, And I was getting methadone from one and Percocets from the other, and it's just so out of control. But anyway, I was getting these from the doctor. I was coming home and selling them to dealers at discounts. If they buy like so many, they could have them for $10 because they sold for $15. If a person just wanted 2 or 3, they were $15 though. And I was like rolling in all this money. And 2006, it finally caught up with me because I'd had a DUI in 2005 for the first time. And I didn't show up for court. It was FTA for my arrest, and when they arrested me for that eventually, I had pills in my pocket and cash in the other pocket. Not a whole lot of pills or cash, either one, and honestly, they were my personal pills. They weren't for sale, but they charged me for trafficking because I had cash in my pocket. So I ended up going to jail, stayed 11 and a half months that time. I had to take a deal too. I had to plead guilty to a felony. And while I was in jail, they came and served another indictment on me for another trafficking case that they actually had me dead to the right selling to someone. And so I was guilty of that. I pled guilty to that and a child support case. They ran them all together as one package. And I made parole on it after 11 and a half months total. So I really got off easy. I got out from, I was on parole for a little while. Then I I pretty much I didn't catch any more felony charges, but I was in and out of jail constantly for violations on that original trafficking charge, just like failure to show up for status hearings, failure to show up for drug screens, and so forth. And 2012, I finally got 2 more PI charges. Now, this whole time that I'm not mentioning this, but I'm actively using, I'm going to pain doctors. Well, 2014, I get indicted for child support. So for child support, they're pretty easy. They usually give you a probated sentence. I'm running wild, and I'm spending every dime that I can hustle up on nonsense. I'm going to these doctors, and I'm investing in other pills, and just basically become just a scummy drug dealer is what I've become. And at times I'm stealing from my own family. My dad owns a grocery store, and he's good enough to let me live in the apartment that's connected to it. It's in the back of the store, really nice apartment. And he catch his head turned, I'm snatching $50 out of the cash register on him. It's the man I idolize, and worship, love more than anything. And the police are on me heavy. They don't have anything on me yet, but they know what I'm doing. They're watching me, and I'm.
So we'll call that chapter 3. Now, let's do some math here real quick. So we're at the early 2010s now. Bill is about 50 years old, and he started drinking when he was in his teens. So that means he's been at this lifestyle for at least 20 years now. Now that's gotta be exhausting, but we're coming up on a turning point here.
2016, I'm on probation because of that child support case. And I'm ordered to drug test twice a week for probation on a child support case, which is unheard of. That's how much they were on to me. They were determined to keep me straight, or I was going to pay the price. So I couldn't pass a drug test. So I just maybe went for the first couple of weeks, and then I just stopped going. So they were looking for me for absconding from child support. Well, while I'm running from that, and they're pulling up every day looking for me, and I'm just sitting there with the door locked, not answering. Then they return an indictment on me for trafficking, another trafficking indictment. Now I'm just desperate on the run now, and they tried to catch me for 6 months, and finally on July the 23rd, 2016, I'm standing outside, had my guard down, and they pulled up on me, and I ran from them. I tried to run, and I actually got way up in the hills from them, and they chased me down, and I run into some briars, and no shirt on, and I just stopped and threw my hands up. They don't like when you run from them, by the way. On the way out of there, I made a decision in my mind that if I was fortunate enough to not get a big prison sentence, I was going to turn my life around after this. So I asked for drug court. I wanted to. Drug court's a pretty good program if you do what they ask of you and stay clean, just meet all your requirements. So they gave me drug court. I got out, and I did perfect for 6 months. I did have a couple short relapses that lasted a day or two each, but ultimately it was so much that just by their guidelines they had to send me to treatment. So I went to Hickory Hill in Knott County. It's about a 7-month program. Probably the best experience I've ever had in my life. They teach you accountability, teach you about steps, teach you about sponsorship, take you to outside AA and NA meetings, 5 a week you have to attend. The sponsorship is probably one of the biggest and most important things, because it encourages you to talk to someone and not bottle things up inside.
So in the recovery world, a sponsor is pretty much somebody who promises that they're going to be there for you when you need someone to talk to.
So when you have an emotional barometer, when it overflows, usually that's by not letting things out, not venting things to people. That's what a sponsor's for. It's just there to listen to you and to guide you through the steps. And
now for the next little bit, Bill unfolds his experience in the recovery center.
You start out as in scrubs, actually. You call that SOS status, safe off the streets. Eventually you become an MT1 and an MT2, and those are just that's motivational track is what those are. And then you become a phase 1 client after about 2 months. And you have a community process where you you hold one another accountable, but then out of genuine love and concern, not to be telling on them, not to be harming them.
Did people really buy into that whole process?
They really did. Most people did. That community process is amazing if it's done right. Mm-hmm. I've been brought to tears before by watching one best friend call out another best friend. And if you didn't know better from being in the program and knowing how it works, you would think, oh my God, why did he do his best friend that way? Why did he tell on his best friend? Because he loves him, you know, like he cares about him. He don't want him to go back out there and relapse and die. And by the way, I left treatment in 2019, and there's been 5 that I was there with that I was very close to that are dead right now. Yeah. And so that's what this is about. Is like you don't want people to go back out there and die. And so I stayed at Hickory Hill for 7 months. I left there. I got my I was in Perry County Drug Court. That's who had ordered me there.
So the completion of his long-term inpatient rehab program marks the end of Chapter 4 in this story. Moving forward, the story turns to be more about landing back on your feet after rehab.
I'd met a girl in Menifee County who was from Hazard as well, and we had begun dating, and she's a very good girl, teaches school at the high school in Menifee County. Never used drugs, just a really good girl. And so she wanted to get me out of Hazard. She thought my best chances would be to leave Hazard. So Menifee doesn't have their own drug court, so I had to transfer to a drug court down in this area. And the part of Menifee I'm in required I go to Montgomery County Drug Court. So I got transferred. That went well at first, and then I got tired of, they required a lot more meetings than Perry County did, and I was working full-time at the Goodwill store, and the pressure and stress of all these meetings and working was just weighing on me, and I started forging some of my meetings, and they eventually caught that. They gave me 30 days in jail over it. So I got out from that, and I didn't forge any more meetings. Obviously, that's where the dishonesty is looked down on more than fell in the drug screen, really, to be honest with you. This was mid-2018. Yeah, as soon as I got out, I'd lost my job at Goodwill, and I started using drugs again. I relapsed after leaving Hickory Hill and learning all that I'd learned. I relapsed, but by the grace of God, somebody called on me immediately, like somebody that loved me here, that cared about me, called on me. How many people do you hear say they told on me and not be mad about it? I get a call at work. I got 30 minutes to be at the drug court office. I knew someone had called on me. I got sent to the Moorhead Inspiration Center, which is another program set up just like Hickory Hill. It's a sister program of it. There's like 8 of them in Kentucky. They're called RKC Centers, Recovery Kentucky Centers is what that stands for. And they're based on the same format, the SOS, the MTs, the Phase 1, and so on. Now, Moorhead, it takes a little longer to complete than Hickory Hill. They just have a longer program for some reason. It's the longest one in the state of the 8 that they have. So I complete Moorhead Inspiration Center, and I get out, and immediately after I got out, I said, gosh, I do so well in these treatment centers. I do so well if I'm in the middle of recovery. You know, if I'm like around it, I thrive in it. And like when I get away from it, I don't. So what can I do to remain in that type of atmosphere? Because it betters my chances of staying clean if I do. I do perfect when I'm around recovery. So I started hearing about this peer support position that they've created. Basically, it's a billable service to Medicaid. It's a very highly marketable position to have. If you have that certification, you can get a job about anywhere that offers behavioral health or substance abuse treatment. So I went and got certified as a peer support specialist.
And that's what led Bill to working in Stanton at Stanton Family Clinic.
As soon as I applied for this job right here, I got an email like 10 minutes later to come in for an interview. It's really odd how it worked out. So I came here
And when was that?
That was in 6 months after I left Moorhead, basically. This was December of 2019.
Yeah.
I started this job January 2nd of this year. Now, me living in active addiction, I was never a good employee for anyone. I was so irresponsible. I was always late, missing work, calling in sick, any excuse to not come in, I'd make it up. And since I've been here, I've not missed a day's work. I have been late on a couple of occasions due to some vehicle problems that I had that they were aware of, but I've not been late more than just a very minimal amount of times. That's all due to the structure that I learned in treatment. Like, you had to be up. I said 6 o'clock for like the first 60 days, then it went to 7. You earn privileges as you go. But there was accountability. If you weren't up at 7 when they came around at 7 sharp, there was a consequence for it. And so you learn that, and you train yourself like if you're not up by 7, you're in trouble. You're not really in trouble, but you're gonna have some kind of consequence. So you carry that in your life out here. The way I look at it is, I can't be late. Absolutely not. And they know here I get so distraught if I do have to be late for a vehicle issue or something.
So it's not like the job is done once you get through a rehab program. The struggle continues on after that and requires daily attention, and it requires you to take the lessons you learn in those treatment programs and apply them to your daily life outside of it. Well, that brings us up to date in this story, so let's get back to Bill for some final thoughts. What would you say was the biggest lesson you learned going from being heavy in addiction and dealing all the way through the recovery process, still in the recovery process and up on your feet again?
I learned so many lessons, but I think that I was trying to hit the big league, hit the jackpot, find happiness in drugs and money, and I always thought if I can just come up with $20,000 at one time, I'll be set. I'll feel like I thought that money would make me feel better. Drugs would make me feel better, and the truth is, you're just running from who you really are. And my dad always told me, he said, son, I'd rather be out here picking up pop cans and not have to watch over my shoulder for the law to pull up than to walk around here with a wad full of $100 bills and have to watch everywhere I pulled out of, wondering if the law was coming so I didn't happen to pull out in front of them. Just that happiness cannot be found in drugs and alcohol and money and women. And these last few years, 2016, I started this recovery process, and I struggled the first couple of years and had the slips that I've talked about. But since 2018, since I got sent to Moorhead Inspiration Center, it's been a real blessing just to have just a little average job, not making much money, but enough to just contribute to the bills, and just to be able to eat and just go to bed at night and sleep and have a vehicle to drive. Not even a nice one, just the basics in life are all that we need. And it's just I can't really explain how you hurt your family and how you literally see the gray hairs in their head that you put there. And my dad passed away while I was at Hickory Hill, so I was in an institution when my father passed away because I wouldn't straighten up, and I had many opportunities to do that, and just take life for granted. And it's tragic. I don't know. That's a debacle right there. That story I just gave, it really was.
Well, that's all the time that we have today. Thank you guys for tuning in and listening to the episode today. Thank you so much to Mr. Bill Helton for coming on the show and being just as open and brave as you were for us. We really appreciate it. And I think it's awesome because the desire to stay clean is definitely there. Well, anyways, I'd like to thank a couple other people before getting off here. WSKV, thank you for broadcasting this show for us. Powell County Health Department, thank you guys for letting the show even be a thing in the first place. Once again, you're listening to The Local Lens. I'm your host, Nate Brooks. These are our people using our voices, telling our stories, because no one sees it like we do.